Thank you so much for that great introduction. I am not big, we were laughing on bios. So a lot of times I like to just be introduced as the moderator speaker, but good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. One more time, good morning. Good morning. I always say if you're gonna make a decision to be somewhere, let people know that you are there and that you're heard. So we made a decision. This is a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about this opportunity. To all of the coordinators here, to Andrea, to Gayle Francis Johnson. It's always good to be in the D. Oh, I'm trying to give y'all a shout out. I mean, come on. It's always good to be in the D. From Columbus, Ohio, excited to be here. We're going to jump right into this conversation that we're going to have today. Some great panelists that you guys will hear. You know about the topic that we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to first start off with Manny Larcher. Manny, if you can come on up as I'm reading it. And I said I don't want to read bios, so I'm just going to give 2 sentences on them so we can get right into the questions. But Manny, come on up. Manny joined JumpStart Ventures in 2022 as a deal flow associate. We've known each other for quite some time in terms of doing some work in the VC space. He connects early stage technology companies with pre-seed, seed, and Series A funding, as well as nourishing relationships with entrepreneurial resources around Ohio. We'll have some time to do some networking of other things that these panelists are doing. I'm just going to do this so we can maximize the time. Gayle, if you want to come up also. Gayle Rominger, 30 years experience in the business development, primarily in the water market area. Board member advisor to and for-profit, nonprofit organizations, company boards, Lion Incorporated, UES, and Brixer and Myers Spoon, Joy, PCU, nonprofit boards, et cetera. Recently experienced in economic development and commercialization of regional technology, mentor, investor, and co-founder in local startups. We've had a chance to talk, and I would tell you, I know she has a passion for the conversation that we're going to be having, especially on the angel investor side. Gloria Ware. Give her a round of applause. Gloria and I had a chance to first meet through doing some introductions to some of the other VCs in the Columbus, Ohio market, and we immediately met. I was like, she's a bad person. She's a bad girl, just representing some, getting some things done. But Gloria is the founder of the GTP Advisors and Get the Bag. Gloria, of course, has extensive experience of 30 years in the finance, ecosystem building, innovation, early stage investing. I will give you more of her background, philanthropy, et cetera. She has served on various boards. She is a financial czar and understands not only where the money is, but how to get the money and manage the money. She has been a featured speaker and participants at several national conferences, including the White House, looking at things on the SBA virtual conference, and CEO for cities and states. So give her a round of applause if you guys have already done it also. And last but not least, Brian Kohr. Brian, come on up. CEO of TriKohr Advisors LLC and TriKohr Capital LLC. Family office consisting of both investment and consulting arms. Brian and I had a chance to meet at Black Tech Week. That was a huge success that we had that was held in Cincinnati, so I had a chance to interact with him there. Currently has 11 direct investments in the portfolio. If you guys heard earlier, was investing one of the founders here with Josh. And thank you for that support, Brian, in terms of seeing that value. Former CEO, president of C-Safe Global, built companies, and more importantly, over $500 million in value creations in terms of his work. And so you have some 2 private equity transactions in that particular amount. So you have some great expertise on this panel. So let's give our panelists a round of applause as we start this session. So we're going to jump right in. This whole topic is around investing in underrepresented founders. And what we're going to do, I'm going to ask your panelists just a couple of questions, and I'll start, Brian, with you. Describe one word that describes who you are and your superpower and why.
Thanks. So my mind is around strategy. The one thing I can do that I help with, Josh was a great example of that, is help companies identify what the right strategy is for the business to go out and be successful to meet a market need and create value for the investors. So that would be my superpower.
Excellent. And we'll make sure that we won't do any name, image, and likeness with Marvels. after this, but we'll work on that. Gloria, how about you? Describe one word that describes who you are and your superpower and why.
I would say connector, but I'm going to cheat and say curator. And it's connectors because I love connecting people that need one another from the city to city, state to state, region to region. And curator is because when I'm making connections, I'm being very thoughtful and understanding the individual's needs or the organization's needs, and just kind of using my database of 30 years of experience to make the right matches.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Gayle, how about you?
I would say facilitator, and what I mean by that is in working with entrepreneurs, I don't know their business. They're the ones that know their business and have a passion for it. What I try to do is just ask a lot of questions. And you ask any of us, enough questions will contradict ourselves. So the great thing about asking questions is to help entrepreneurs sort of see some of the gaps in their strategy and their thinking, and how can they be clearer and more defined about what it is that they need to do and what it is that's going to be most important with the resources that they have to spend.
Excellent. Manny?
I'd say, is this on?
Oh.
Awesome. I would say momentum. I think that, well, I was going to say strategy and connector, but yeah, momentum. You know, before coming into VC, I owned an agency, and then I built a marketplace. So just really connecting people. I think, you know, helping people get customers, and then the next level of investors. You know, bringing that energy. So I'll say that's mine.
It's awesome. I appreciate you guys. And then the last question before we get into some of the immediate questions is, so what is your, passion? We talk about this thing about passion, but what is your favorite part of being an investor or ecosystem partner? And anybody can answer that. But what is your favorite part of being an investor or ecosystem partner? Anybody can jump in. Yep.
I think it's watching the entrepreneur and the team grow, and for them building more confidence that they know how to do what it is that needs to be done. It's almost parental in a way when you get really close to these people and you want to see them be successful, and they struggle because everybody struggles in the beginning. But then, they start having success, they start figuring it out, they build their confidence, they build a good team around them like Josh talked about earlier. And that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, I enjoy seeing founders, particularly those that want to make a positive difference and transformation in the world, seeing them win and seeing them pay it forward through their impact.
Anyone else? Good.
Yeah, I'm 33 years old, so I'm still learning. My business partner bought a house, which felt pretty. Felt like that's
The
what
American dream.
Yeah,
Right.
So.
That sounds good. Well, let's jump right into some of the questions, and then for the audience, you guys will have an opportunity to, of course, have some Q&A and come down and interact with the panelists. Research shows that women, primarily this is from the AACSB International, which is the global nonprofit association that connects educators and students and businesses to achieve their common goal, to create the next generation of great leaders, which I think is important also. We don't always talk about that next gen in terms of their interest. And if you didn't know, 72% of high school students want to be entrepreneurs. I'll repeat that. 72% of all high school students want to be entrepreneurs. That'll be a different topic at a different time, but I want you to marinate on that in terms of what this is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. Research shows that women and underrepresented founders receive less than 3% of capital investments. Only 1% of founders backed by venture capital are black, and less than 2% are Latino. At the same time, black entrepreneurs are rejected for loans at a rate almost 20% higher than white entrepreneurs. Question becomes, why is that? Anyone wants to jump into that? Why is that? And you don't have to be a banker, but this is the data that drives this kind of conversation beyond conferences. But why is that data? Maybe, Manny, why don't we start with you? Why is that data that way? Because when we look at people on paper, some of the times we're not looking at them in terms of who they are, what they represent, their morals and their values, but whether or not they fit a criteria. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But Manny, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like history, unfortunately, sometimes that we're up against. You know, we were all at Black Tech Week, so you know, slaves had to cross the river, right, to become free, and then they had to go through the Underground Railroad in Columbus, and then if they were lucky, they could make it to Cleveland, and then, you know, some settled there, but some people, you know, they used that tower to cross to Canada, and the black people that grew up in Canada, you know, they didn't encounter as much racism. Some people went up north, right? So, like, I think, so from a venture capital perspective, you know, there's a reason Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. So, you know, they want you to be at the Ivy League schools. And I think all of these we're now in a time where you have, you know, Drive Capital, you have people coming up with investment thesis to invest in the Midwest. Well, the reason I'm at JumpStart is because we've been investing in Ohio specifically for 18 years. We have like 161 companies in our portfolio, 160 of them are from Ohio. You know, all the numbers you're going to say about Black and Brown, JumpStart is the anomaly. Like, you know, they've invested in several Black founders, and you know, so those are all the reasons why I'm here, and I think just historically, that's why it's set up the way it's set up, and it takes, you know, panels like this and people like you know, to make a difference and take a risk, I guess.
That's good. I appreciate that response and answer. Anyone else want to respond? Please, Gloria.
Yes. Having worked as a banker for most of my career and at JumpStart for up until the last year, I would say, but a lot of it is driven by, and this is well documented, relationships. As with everything, you know, one of the first questions, sadly, as a commercial lender at the bank, I would ask my client was, who did they know at the bank? Right. That made a huge difference in terms of how much work I had to do to make things happen for them. So, you know, it's well documented that venture capital, finance, tech, all of these systems are very, are kind of dominated by one group, right? So people are naturally going to get connected to people that are in their same group, right, in their same sphere, and understand them and relate to them and understand the problems that that the founders are solving. Fortunately, there are more women-led venture capital funds, Black-led, Latinx-led, even immigrant-led funds that they also have groups. You know, the women, they know other women. They understand women's issues, right? There's a lot happening around female tech. Black accelerators, incubators, and VCs, they understand the problems. They get it. They understand what the founder, to your point, above and beyond what's on the checklist, what the founder may have done to get to that point of even pitching to them, right? And some of the challenges for that. So fortunately, you know, I've been participating in these types of panels for 10 years and the statistics remain the same, right? So I'm excited to be with Brian and Gayle because I know that they do have a great track record of investing in underrepresented founders, but until we solve that relationship problem, you know, that's going to, you know, 10 years from now, we may be having the same conversation.
Great response. Brian, Gayle?
Yeah, I would echo that. It is around the relationships and who you know. I mean, 3 of my 11 direct investments are with underrepresented owners, and to be honest with you, my focus on that has been zero. I didn't say, gee, let me go out and do that. Right. It's just they had great business ideas, and they were able to get into my network. So I absolutely agree. It is absolutely important to, and you saw that from Josh. Those of you who listen to Josh, he's one of the best at networking there is, right? He will go and meet the right people and connect dots. And my sense is, as a minority owner, it is harder, and the work is harder than if you're not, if you're white. But you know, one of my mentors says, you know, hard work is not hard, it's just work, right? And as Josh said, you have to do it. It's part of the game, but it's doable. And knowing people, building your networks, connecting the dots, having, the one thing I know about the private equity firms, the venture capitalists, and the other angel investors, we all like to make money, right? And so we are absolutely more than happy to invest in businesses that we believe are going to provide a multiple on our money. And so it really is, how do you connect the dots and be able to present your business idea in front of the right people?
Thanks, Brian. Gayle?
I'll give a bit of a plug for the Entrepreneur Center, because the companies that I've invested in that are headed by underrepresented people, I met through the Entrepreneur Center. And it's back to your point about relationships. We weren't in the same social circles, we didn't live in the same neighborhood. I didn't know these people, but I met them through the Entrepreneur Center. And I think the great thing about local ESPs, which is local entrepreneur centers, is they're really interested in the community. They want to help the community. And as Brian said, at the end of the day, we invest because we see the opportunity to make money. But the Entrepreneur Center and organizations like that in Ohio that are local really draw in the local people that then the local investors can meet. And we really want to do things that help the community beyond just making money, but things that we see the community being able to generate economic development by making these investments.
That's terrific. What I'd like to reiterate, and I appreciate everybody's input on that, because we all come from different disciplines and backgrounds, and I think it was all talked about in my experiences also in terms of working in a particular space. Everybody understands one color, and that's green. I'm just going to let that marinate. And so often we become so formalized, Brian, to your point of, but why do we have to do this diversity? Why do we have to do this with people of color? Why do we have to do this underrepresented? If you build the business case, and if somebody says, oh, I can make how much on that? Can we meet right now in a coffee shop? And so it's not always the formalization, but the business case is, let me show you where and why this needs to happen. The other part of that for the founders in the room also is do the due diligence of who you're meeting with. Understand the criteria. This just goes back to homework 101. Not because an announcement was made because JumpStart got $20 million. The question is, what did they get $20 million to do? And so when you talk about the relationships, do I fit the criteria? And if not JumpStart, who else can I go to? But it is about relationships. It is about who's in the room. We'll talk about this a little bit throughout this conversation of who's not at the table. So if you ever look into a particular space, you need to ask yourself a question. So who's not here, and then why? And so please go ahead.
So I do want to also give a plug for the Entrepreneurship Center. Particularly, I've had the opportunity to work with Belinda Matthews Stinson and Gayle Johnson for the last 5 years. And I've had the opportunity to work across the state with tech ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystems across the state. And I've been just lauding the work that they do around when they're in the room, because you could be in the room, what are you doing? Right? What are you saying? Yes. Are you being that diverse perspective, bringing that voice, and that's very difficult at times. But what I love about what the two of those individuals is that they're very plugged, to Gayle's point, in the local community, and they're passionate and committed about changing those statistics that we talked about. And they bring new ideas. So they will, look at a founder that may be a business owner, established business owner, successful product market fit, that could be a tech-enabled company, right? And bringing them over into the tech ecosystem and making those connections. I met Josh about 2019 in December in Cincinnati. I connected him. I knew immediately who to connect him to. We were in Cincinnati, but he said he lived in, I think, Austintown, which I'm like, close enough to Dayton. And I connected him to Gayle and Belinda, and they took the ball and ran with it, right? Yes. So that point of knowing the right people, and then if you are in the room, what are you doing to challenge the process and to bring innovation to the process and to address some of these systemic issues? So shout out to the Entrepreneurship Center.
I appreciate that, and I'll have to use that. I'll give you credit, just not being in the room, but make a difference while you're in the room. I like that. Another question, what are the myths or barriers surrounding investing in underrepresented founders? I'm going to repeat that again. What are the myths or barriers when it comes surrounding investing in underrepresented founders? Manny, what do you think about that question? What are the myths or barriers surrounding investing in underrepresented founders? Kind of goes back to the misperceptions and perceptions of getting people being on paper but not necessarily knowing who you're investing in. Please.
Well, I mean, it's going to be the network effect, right? And then probably the inability to raise, I think. So I think those are the myths.
Okay, anyone else? Just Gayle?
I think some of the barriers for underrepresented entrepreneurs is you have to start with some amount of money. Either you are saving your own money, working and saving your own money to build up your nest egg, or you're, which is good, but so many other people are able to tap in initially to friends and family. And sometimes underrepresented entrepreneurs just don't have those resources. They just don't have family and friends that can write a check for $10,000 or $15,000. And so those are some of the barriers in getting started, even, way beyond angel and VC, just getting started. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the, I think, the barriers, and I think places like the Entrepreneur Center, again, I'm going to plug that because I see that they can help make the connections to make new friends that are willing to, write the $10,000 check as opposed to just your own circle of friends and family.
That's good. Gloria? I knew you had something to say.
Miss, I don't know, I haven't heard this as much recently, but that there's a pipeline issue, like that applies, whether it's banking, VC, or whatever, but definitely a myth, right? Because number one, we've had, there's been a lot more women-led, underrepresented founder funds that have established. One is Lightship Capital, right in our own backyard in Cincinnati, and they have had no problem finding founders to invest in, right? So that is, and again, that goes back to that relationship piece. But then the other thing is, are you presenting yourself in such a way that makes yourself appealing? What problems are you solving? This is why we need to have more women and people of color in the decision-making room when they're doing due diligence as venture partners on the funds, because they can often translate the challenge or the problem, right? So, and also advocate. I mean, I've been in many rooms, right, in my past, having to push hard, right, when people weren't getting it, and making sure that founder received the investment that they needed and the resources that they needed.
Well, let's add to that. I want to continue that momentum. Why is it important to have VC funds and programs that are designed to assist minorities, right, and women founders? We would just wonder, why is it so often we hear, well, just apply. Everybody should just apply, in an evening playing field. So why are we seeing this differentiation of we need to have this, regardless of the data, talking about the business case again, but I want to go back to Gayle's point in terms of why is it important to have these kind of funds designed, and Manny, I'll start with you because I know JumpStart is doing a lot in that particular space. What did the light bulb, and I know you had just come on board to join them recently, but in terms of what do you think within the JumpStart culture, where I said, you know what, we need to have a meeting to discuss, to be intentional and not wait for somebody to tell us that this should be happening?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like the ecosystem as well, and exposing people to opportunities. I think, so, before joining JumpStart, I was a founder. I had raised money from Rev 1 Ventures in the past, and that did well. And I built up a company, had a lot of success. Basically, no one invested in me. And I never pitched JumpStart, though. If anything, I was too scared to pitch JumpStart. But I met a guy that played in the NBA, Michael Redd, and his partner, Danny Ortiz. And I really do have to plug them in this situation because they gave me permission to start. And it wasn't just me. There was like a room full of 20 black men that they were also mentoring. And, you know, I think that right there, when you're in a room and you feel comfortable and you see a guy that has accomplished everything and everyone loves him, and then it was just that access, I guess, you know, like, so I think that creates that momentum, and then from there, you know, you'll feel more comfortable, you know, going after your ideas. But I think that's it. I think, like, if you're not in a you know, a nourishing environment, then you're not going to share your ideas. So I'm gonna plug the Entrepreneur Service Center too. Even though aesthetically this is like the nicest one that I've been in Ohio, just so y'all know.
Very nice. Very nice.
But
It is very
my
nice,
start was Chase Startup Week.
Yeah,
I had like built up a little website company. Kevin Hart retweeted me, and I was getting a ton of hits. And then so I went to the first Chase Startup Week in Columbus. I was just like trying to get investors, and somebody offered me a job out of there. Ryan McManus, shout out to Ryan. And Ryan's company Share just raised like $12 million this year. But at that time, like, Share wasn't even a thought, you know. So it was being in that room, meeting Ryan. You know, it takes some time. So yeah, events like this is important because it brings people who don't know each other in the same room.
Anyone else? Brian or Gayle or Gloria? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I remember about 15 years ago, nobody was investing in the Midwest, right? So private equity firms, venture capital, they're all on the coasts. And then they started going ding, 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 there's money to be made in the Midwest, and so they started putting money here. You know, there's money to be made, and you know, we live in a capitalist society. I have no apologies for that. You know, I have created a family foundation, so I trust me, I give enough back to the community. But we live in a capitalist society, and as you said, you know, everybody knows one color, which is green. So the reason why to have specific funds focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs is there's opportunity there, right? If somebody else is not going to make that investment, I'm more than happy, and there's plenty of people more than happy to make that investment, right? So that would be an easy reason to do that is if there's an opportunity to create value because people are, for whatever reason, are kind of ignoring that market, step right in.
That's terrific. I like that answer. Gayle? Okay.
I have.
Gloria, please.
Yeah. I love Brian's analogy to the Midwest because, to his point, no one was thinking about the Midwest, so people from the Midwest had to take action to create funds, you know, make the pitches, build the relationships, and as a result of that, we are starting to see more people paying attention to that area, and then for the same reason that people were creating these special initiatives and programs, but more specifically, funds, right? Because, you know, you need to have more than a program or initiative to support underrepresented founders. If it's just window dressing, which unfortunately that is kind of the perception that many of them have, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you are getting traction, right? That you're making accomplishments, that you're achieving investments, and be transparent with that, right? The more transparent you can be with your number and, more importantly, dollars amount of capital invested in underrepresented founders as opposed to your programs and your events, the more credibility and value you have, and the more it'll be a pool for underrepresented founders. They'll find you. Just like Manny said, you know, there was some reluctance that he had to, you know, applying to JumpStart, and we would have missed out, right, on all of his brilliance and his work had he not had other kind of people that had been intentional about creating opportunities, and now that he's in a position at JumpStart to make a difference. But yeah, so that's just my 2 cents.
No, it's great, and I'm listening to you, and man, it's funny how you were afraid to approach JumpStart, and now you're working for them. That is a story in itself that comes full circle. You also said something I think that the audience needs to remember and hear also. You were in an environment that you felt comfortable in. And that made a difference of rather being the only one. We've all been there. So when you walk into an environment and everybody looks like you, or at least you can speak the King James Version, whatever that is that particular time, or the right type of coffee to order. You learn those things, but you were comfortable enough with Michael and others in that room that says, well, clearly, I'm going to ask all the questions because it's okay to learn from that. And I think for the founders, again, that are here, it's important to understand the landscape of the room. Read the room and know who's in the room. But if there are people that are there, please ask that dumb question because everybody else is asking that dumb question. And I always say, don't leave that environment without asking those questions. So I just wanted to commit. Go ahead, yeah, please.
My parents still live in Columbus, so I was with them yesterday, basically. Like, anytime I'm in Columbus, they're the first people I got fed up and moved to Miami during the pandemic. And before I moved, I kind of met with them, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this, So you need that, and I think that, it could also be an unconscious bias that we have, right? Like, depending on your upbringing. I'm an immigrant. Right. Both my parents are from St. Lucia. I literally lived in the islands from 5 to 11, and then I went from that to Hilliard,
That's
Ohio.
Our next conference is going to be there, by the way.
In Hilliard. So, I've kind of been all over the place, and, I was like the token in Hilliard, and that's a whole conversation.
I appreciate that. How important is it for you to collaborate with other investors that may have more breadth and depth in the investing in underrepresented founders? I'm going to repeat that again because the key word on this is collaboration. How important is it to collaborate with other investors that may have more breadth and depth in investing in underrepresented founders? Anyone, please, Brian.
I think it's significant, and you could put that as a category and say underrepresented, but I will say it's important to collaborate with other investors who are experts in anything you're looking at investing in, right? So if it's a software, a SaaS business, or if it's a manufacturing business, if it's a healthcare business, there's attributes, right, to each of those, and being able to collaborate with those who understand. So, for example, those who understand a minority-owned business and the minority market maybe potentially, because you got to categorize the businesses. Is this a underrepresented business that's trying to go after a market within the underrepresented community, or is this an underrepresented owner that's going after the broader market, right? Because if it's going after the broader market, I have as much potential to understand the strategy and the value creation there. But if it's going after a specific niche market that I don't understand, then absolutely, I guess I would put that in the same categories as any of these others. Having access to an expert or somebody who has that understanding is invaluable.
Yeah, I would like to add to that is being self-aware enough to know that you don't know everything, right? Particularly when you're conducting due diligence or you're screening, founders in the pitch session. And so that's where it is. I mean, a good example is if you think about the types of investments that are made in Cincinnati versus Cleveland, and just even their, Cleveland is manufacturing, right? I think across the state we're all healthcare and SaaS. But Cincinnati is consumer packaged goods, right? So if I came to Cleveland, right, with an idea around a new product, a physical product, I would, it probably wouldn't be very well received, right? But if the ecosystem players and the investors are leveraging all of the great resources of the great state of Ohio and reaching to Cincinnati and get expertise on like, hey, it doesn't make sense to us, right? But before we say no, right, let's talk to Brandery, let's talk to Cincy Tech let's talk to Lightship Capital to see if they have some knowledge and context that they can bring to this conversation that can help increase our awareness. So I think the key is, as an investor, is to always take a deep, hard look at yourself and opportunities for you to improve and innovate. And kind of sometimes we need to get out of our bubbles and leverage all of the amazing resources that we have across the state, because I think Ohio can be a huge player in this space with all of the activities and people that we have involved in our ecosystem.
Yeah, please.
No, and I agree. I'm bullish. I mean, Chicago's ahead, but we could like literally be the best state if we, if investors share deal flow, at the end of the day, you know, we don't lead rounds, right? So we have to partner up with other investors. So, like, I went to this conference over the weekend, and everyone should know this, the M25 Summit, M25 conference, but they cut checks, you know, into companies like First. Basically, in one day, they connected us to founders, one-on-one meetings, like we had 14 of them, and then the next day they connected us to investors, one-on-one meetings, 14. So it was, and then the only time there was networking was happy hour drinks, right? So like, but during the day we were talking about deals we're looking at, right? What's open? What do you like, right? So to me, I think that's what makes a good investor, in my opinion. And then, I mean, going to Gayle's point, you know, yeah, I know our thesis, I know what we do and don't do. So if I meet a guy that has something really good, the least I could do is share it to another investor, you know? So I think, you know, that's kind of how I approach it, and just trying to help, like, think founder first, and then believe in, you know, paying it forward, hopefully.
Yeah, and Brian and I are connected on an investment, and it was really instrumental for me coming in because I knew Brian was playing an instrumental role with the company on its strategy. So that having that sort of credibility that Brian saw the opportunity in this company and was helping them on their strategy, that collaboration that I knew Brian made it much easier for me to write the check.
That's so cool. I like that. And Gloria, I think, brought up a key point, and Brian, you also alluded to this. From a demographic standpoint, at the end of the day, how does Ohio win? And it's important that from a business standpoint, because we've all been there on, especially underrepresented founders being, you know, drafted, if you will, to other states and other parts of this country because they can provide more incentives. And so they struggle to stay here in Ohio to say, show me the love. You know, one of my favorite movies is Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money. You know, show me that you actually want to invest in me because other states, and we've seen that across the board of other states studying us. And Brian, I think you brought this point up, if you don't want to invest in me, I'll go and find where somebody will. And then the funny part is we want to bring them back to recognize them in Ohio, right? And it's like they're from Dayton. What are you talking about? What happened? They're from Cincinnati. So I just wanted to raise that point. That's really important. And then I think, Manny, you brought up a key point also about the sharing with other investors. You're not my competition. No. We're not going to lose this deal because if the founder walks out without any investors, that's not good. And so I think that's very important that you guys have brought that up, and just kudos to you because you don't hear this enough. There's misperceptions also in the investment space of I'm not going to share, you know, my strategies, and there's ways to do that. But I think the collaboration. But I wanted to bring that point up. That's how does Ohio win? I didn't on behalf of Ohio founders. Do you ever? Well, let me ask you another question here. What is the role of technology? Or what is the role? I'm sorry, to technology, traction, and team when making an investment and recommending founders to investors? Which is the most important T? Kind of like that question. What is the most important T in that particular question? Anybody want to tackle that? What is the role to technology, traction, and team when making investment and recommending founders to investors? Which is the most important T?
I mean, for me, it's easy. It's team at the end of the day. You know, it's now normal for us to see companies doing $1 million ARR and not invest in them. So in situations like that, it's like, okay, well, this person's not going to be easy to work with, right? You know, so I think the individual, right? And we had a great example of Josh being here before, right? The individual could create traction and tech, yeah. So so I think team, and then everything else. If the team is good, coachable, has humility, I think everything else could come.
I'm going to say, if you're talking to founders, traction and team are tied, right? Because often I've seen where investors didn't necessarily, and you see this, you know, if the investors didn't necessarily understand the market or the opportunity, or like, yes, great team, but I'm not really sure if there's a there there, but traction, right, talks, right? And traction also helps to increase your network of funding opportunities, right? Because if you can go anywhere with that traction, right? If it's in, you're working with the right market or the right type of investors. But team is very close to that, because you want to be able to, maintain the traction, scale it, and then, be able to build cohesive, productive relationships with your future talent and respective investors and customers.
All right, did anyone else?
Well, I'll throw a curveball.
Okay.
I'll say they're all important at different times and different stages of the business, because there's times where your team's going to have to pull you through. There's time where the technology is going to have to prove itself, and there's time where, okay, how it proves itself is you're gaining traction. So I don't know if there's one specific you'd say throughout the journey. I would say all three are important at different times throughout the journey.
That's good, and I like all of those answers. And I think, again, to the founders, I think Gloria brings up a key point also is, my version of that is, have the street cred. Do not say that you can do something and then not be able to deliver. I'm going to repeat that. Too often, we've all been there where your deck said this, and the question was asked, well, give us some case studies and examples. It's like, well, that's why I need your money. And it's like, wait a minute, you got the order wrong. To Gloria's point, if you have the traction, that we can help you get to that next level. But I think, again, the investment, kind of going back to the family and friends, but be very careful, right, of what you're putting in your deck. And it's okay to minimize that, to say, I'm not there yet, and this is my first phase, second phase, because I think, as Manny's shaking his head, people want to come in and be like, I want $2 million, $10 million. This isn't the lottery. This is, because understand, when people invest in you, guess what? They want 5X back at a minimum. And so invest in yourself first to make sure that you can deliver, because the best currency is your name and your reputation.
Yeah, I always say, do what you say you're going to do. And to your last comment, which I love, an idea is not worth $10 million. Okay? If it was, 72% of the high school kids who want to be entrepreneurs would all get, as soon as they graduate high school or college, would get $10 million, because they all have ideas. Ideas are not worth that much money. You've got to put some work in and show there's some traction, building a team.
Let me add to that real quick. So another question is, how do you respond to the optics of seeing founders who fail, that were given millions of dollars, and go on to receive additional funding? Gayle, don't laugh too hard down on the left, but because none of us understand that at all. That's just a. So Manny, go ahead, please.
I think it's a little, I know for me at least, I think it's, when you're starting off, sometimes you get so attached to like that idea, right? Like I have a friend, he lost his sister during childbirth, and he started a company, right, to help improve the infant mortality rate. So you got to think about him when he's in front of a founder or investor, and he's pitching the business. Sometimes we have a tendency to get so emotional in that, and then not focus on the money, and I think that hurts us. And then I just think, going back to the point, I think you have to think, well, obviously we want to see a big idea and we want to multiply the money, but as opposed, everyone's going to come in the room and show a hockey stick growth. So it's more about, how are you going to get there? And then in terms of like just being honest, if you're not honest and then we start doing due diligence and we find something, it's just going to delay everything, or cancel everything. So the more honest, you are where you're at, that's how we know how we can help you and how we can connect you to the right people. And then really all of these things are all going to blow up too. Like for you, like, like there's going to be eventually a time where everything can, like, well, why did you, so it's really just like being honest, being transparent.
For me, you're going to fail, right? As an entrepreneur, you're going to fail, right? That's a lot of times it might be your third or fourth business, which is the one that you've leveraged all of your failures and experiences, and you finally kind of hit the ball out the park. I would say the challenge for me is why did you fail, right? And how did you fail? If there are some unethical practices, potentially fraudulent practices that were uncovered in dissecting the failure, that's where I have the problem, right? And also, I also have a problem when you do have founders that have traction, they have team, they have revenue, they have everything, and they're still being challenged with accessing capital. And I think we know we're all talking about the whole WeWork situation. And I think just that was the frustration of a lot of founders, was that they've been to all of the panels, right? They've read all the books. They did all the things, but yet they're still like struggling to raise money when you have situations like that where he's raising out, ridiculous amounts of capital. And I think it was really the blowback was more so on all of the other things that we heard that had happened with WeWork and the conflict of interest and the self-interest that were involved with that just kind of flew in the face of, kind of everything that people have been saying.
Great example, and it kind of goes back again. I've done all the due diligence, and I still got the no. And so, and let me ask this, what's the motivation to help founders stay in the game, that the yes is coming? But so often, when they hear the yes, can they now react to the yes? Can you guys speak on that also? Because so often you see that, well, what do I do now that I didn't make the cut again? What do I do the next time, or I'm coming around this next round? What have you guys done in your particular spaces to keep founders motivated to say, this is what you really need to do that we didn't discuss in the meeting? Because that's really the telltale sign of how do I come back and not make the same mistakes over and over again? Anybody? Please.
One of the things I think is really important, and it goes back to the relationships in the ecosystem, but help that founder recognize that maybe an advisory board and some people that are in the industry, that have industry experience and where they're going, can give you credibility the next time around. So again, just surrounding yourself with relationships and people in the ecosystem that are going to build your credibility. Because it may not have been that, it may have been a situation, like what you said with the bank. Well, who do you know at the bank? It may have been that the investors thought it looked good, but there just wasn't enough credibility that this team really knew what they were doing, or they had enough people around them that they could take it to the next level.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand, those connections, right, and what they are to, what's the value of them. And so categorizing who are the networkers, who are the people who have, the entrepreneurs, been successful entrepreneurs, who are the investors, categorizing these connections so that you're not going to a network person to raise dollars, right? And you're not going to an investor who only is investing money that's never run a business for operating strategic advice. It's really understanding all of your connections and using them appropriately. And so to your question of how do you keep a founder engaged, is a founder needs to go to the right people, right? And sometimes you need a cheerleader, and sometimes you need a coach, and sometimes you need your butt kicked. And understanding at what point in time, do you go talk to that person? Because all you do is go to a cheerleader, oh, you're doing great, you're doing awesome, and then you hit a wall and you fall off a cliff, right? Because if you're told you're great the entire time and then you fail, you lose a lot of energy and you want to give up, right? At the same point, if you're being successful and all you're doing is getting your butt kicked all the time, it kind of gets a little bit depressing. So it's understanding where those people are in your network and what they bring, what value to you, and using them appropriately.
Yeah, and I'll just say to add to that, you want to work with an investor that has conviction about your idea. So if you're spending a lot of time convincing an investor, it's probably going to be a no anyway. So I some of the best people that I know that have raised in Ohio, it's like a screening within the first 15 minutes, whether or not we should even go deeper. So yeah, it's a numbers game though at the end of the day, and for every investor, we want to see that you have the ability to raise, or at least go through the grind and learn from the no's.
This is good. I think I want to pause right here now as a good segue to open it up for some Q&A in terms of that. And so I'll yield to looking around. I guess I'll just ask the persons to stand up. I don't know if we have a mic or not, but if not, if you guys can just speak loudly so everyone can hear you. Please go ahead, gentlemen. Yep.
Quote that I kind of came up with while I was reading through investment books and stuff like that is all capital is social capital. And like right now, I'm about to graduate from college. I have a couple ideas, but I feel like the venture capital that I need is not like money. I need like the investors, not the like the people around me. That type of capital, social capital. What would be the best way that you would suggest to build that social capital?
Yeah, when I think of social capital, like I just think of like, yo, what's up, Ari? What's up? You know what I'm saying? Like to me, that's what I think of social capital. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to me, when I hear the word social capital, I just think of like, okay, well, how many friends you have, and then it's like, okay, well, are they going to connect you to people? And then to Gayle's point, like when you're not in the room, how are they talking about you? You know, so that's how I look at social capital.
I think you're doing it now, right? Just being here. A lot of people self-select themselves out of opportunities. And so the fact that you're here is great. And social capital is huge because that is what makes things happen, right? And so, connecting with the people that are here. LinkedIn is my favorite tool. LinkedIn is my jam. Right? I think LinkedIn is a great way to connect with people here and then leverage it so that people see your accomplishments as you graduate, as you start your business, seeing your successes. And then another great way I've seen a founder, Dawn Dixon of Popcom, she was initially declined by, I think, JumpStart, and she created a newsletter, right? Because it's hard, trying to stay in contact with everyone, but she really leveraged the social capital that she would secure from going to pitch events, from networking events, got them on her newsletter list, and as she was growing and building, shared that, and then people could see her development and traction over time, and eventually, some other efforts, she was able to secure some capital. But she then she leveraged her social capital by raising additional money, millions and millions of dollars, through crowdfunding campaigns. She currently has a crowdfunding campaign right now. So social capital is huge. It definitely is about relationships and who you know, but it's like, what are you doing to nurture those relationships and to promote yourself in those relationships? And how are you leveraging the advice that you're getting, right, from, asking people for help, but then I don't see you execute on it. You've kind of wasted folks' time. So, let people know that you're leveraging the advice and input that they're sharing, and I think you can see some great ROI on that social capital.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, I think, me being a millennial, I think millennials, we network and work with, people older our age, and then we also hang out with people younger as well. And then there's an art in, bringing that together and sharing those ideas. So, your generation, everyone's trying to figure it out and get attention, and we're spending time on TikTok and Snapchat. So there's just a lot of different lanes that you have that is very valuable. It's just understanding, being able to present that,
I think one of the things that is important to know, there's a lot of successful business people, and one thing that we have in common is we all have egos, and we love for people to reach out and say, man, I'm looking to get in this space. I'd love, could I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain on an idea? The one thing about this community that's incredible is that people want to help. There's a lot of people like Gayle out there who want to help. But you have to do the work, right? I'm not going to find you. You have to find me. If it's something, what I would do is, if you got these ideas, is what would the mentor or advisor look like to help you most in those ideas you have? What field would they come? What expertise would they have? What experiences would they have? And reach out to those people. LinkedIn is an absolute perfect way of just reaching out. I want to connect. Hey, I'm a young, about to graduate college student, and I've got some business ideas in the field I think you're an expert in. Could I pick your brain? Could I have a 30-minute Zoom call with you if they're out of town? Or could I meet you could I buy you a cup of coffee? I don't TikTok. So, LinkedIn, right? Manny had a good point, right? You want to talk to people of experiences. They're not 25-year-olds. They're not many 33-year-olds either. You're looking for people, much older, and LinkedIn's a great way to connect with them. And we drink coffee.
And I'll just say this too, to Brian's point earlier about an idea not worth 10 million, depending on if you had success in the previous, right, and you made a company 4 billion, then your idea might be worth 360 million, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
basically what happened with Adam Newman. So if you have past success, then the next idea is really, everyone's going to welcome it.
Let me answer that real quick, and I'll take the question in the back. I'm coming to you. When you come to an event like this, and it was said, put that out there, and enjoyed being at Launch Dayton Startup Week today, interacting with individuals like ourselves or just the room. You have to show people where you are and what you're doing. To the panelist's point, then people will start to read more about what you're doing. Don't do it every day. Be very strategic. Be very selective. There are a lot of people who are just running for office that don't need to be running for office on social media. They're just posting, I call that noise. There's nothing there but just photos. So be very strategic in what you're doing. The mere fact that you're here, and this isn't for class credit, yeah, you need to let everybody know that you're taking time out to invest in yourself. In the back, you had a question? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Gayle and Gloria, my name is my business experience source. My first cycle in my business, 15 years. Okay. I've been quasi-retired for a little while, now I'm scaling up. So do you all offer any coaching sessions or consulting where I can run my business plan by you and get your feedback?
I'd be happy to connect.
And also, I would touch base with the Entrepreneur Center or the Small Business Center. They have tremendous amount of resources that they can apply to help you with the business plan.
I have a business plan. I'm looking for your expertise specifically.
Okay.
So I'm willing to pay. I have capital. I'm just looking for you guys to
Okay.
exercise what I have.
Okay.
Manny and I don't feel offended.
Right.
Maybe a little bit.
Equal opportunities. Other questions? Oh, sure. Yeah, please.
When I see venture capital, I find it's almost like if you got it, it's almost like I have the vision of Scrooge McDuck and you're swimming in on money. But my question was, after that happens, how does your relationship change? I feel like that's when the rubber meets the road and the hard work starts. Can you kind of explain to me what the next 3 to 9 months are like once you get venture capital?
I like to take this one. My advice, because I like to mentor before I invest. So my advice typically is don't take outside money until you have to. There are certain times where it makes sense. For example, I'm invested in a tech company down in Atlanta, and he didn't need to raise money, but he wanted to raise money because he wanted that accountability from an outside group putting pressure on him to grow his business. That's a good reason to raise capital, because the expectations and the accountability go up, right? If you own 100%, you have no investors, you have to drive yourself, but you don't really have that accountability. Once you start taking money from the outside, I'm now going to hold you accountable because you have my money. And so when you lay out your deliverables, we said earlier, you better do what you say you're going to do, or have a good reason why it didn't happen, because I'm not running the business. I'm recognizing that you are, and you have to do that. So you don't swim in the money. You've passed over the hurdle. You have the money, but you have to understand, now I have the money. Oh gee, now I bet I have to deliver, right? And so that level of accountability grows up dramatically. So I always say, until you have to raise money, hold off. Not just from the standpoint of you don't want to give up equity at a lower valuation, but it's really, you understand the world will change. Your world will now change.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what I think a lot of founders don't understand, is that now it's not just your company, right? And I've seen this happen. You are accountable to the needs, interests, those milestones that you said that you were going to hit as a result of raising that round. And a lot of founders are challenged with that, right? Because they're used to being the ones making the decisions, calling the shots. And this is why it's super important to have the right relationship with the right investors, choose your investors wisely, because if you're at odds with their philosophies or their approaches, they are connected to other investors, right? And while things aren't really supposed to go outside of what's happening in your company, they talk. So venture capital, fortunately, there are other options or more options for founders nowadays, funding options, revenues-based financing, crowdfunding. There's many more venture capital funds that are out there, but that's really important to do your due diligence and understanding like what's going to happen. A great book for this is there's an angel investor, a serial entrepreneur by the name of Kathleen Haig, and she wrote a book called Fund It, and she gives you what you need to do before, how do you prepare for due diligence? This is because that's the other thing that a lot of founders are completely caught off guard on the due diligence side, and then kind of how to manage your investor. So I recommend that book to everyone. I think Kathleen with a K, Hague, Hague, something like that, and it's called Fund It. Yeah, that's a good book. Another great book is to Brian's point of, going as long as you can without raising outside funds is Build the Damn Thing by Catherine Finney, Kathryn, who has a fund. She had a company called a nonprofit that was called Digital Undivided, which was the first organization to track how much money women of color have raised from venture capital. But she left that to found the Genius Guild. She has a venture capital fund, and it's a solid. That is the book, right? So on all the things that you might encounter, this is what you need to do before you even approach. I do think it's never really too early to build relationships, because it might be 2 years from now when you're ready to do, or something has changed and you're maybe interested in working with the VC. So it's never too early to build those relationships. Don't be afraid. And then talk to other founders, because they'll tell you what it's like, right, to receive capital, right? Pros and cons of that. So the biggest thing you can do is talk to other founders that have been in your shoes, that have raised, and you will get so much information. But I don't see a lot of founders doing enough of that.
Yeah, the other thing to remember with VCs is they want an exit. So if you think you're founding a company that you want to keep for the next 10, 15, 20 years, that's not what they want. They're going to want the company to exit out. They're going to want to exit out and the company to exit out. So that's another thing to keep in mind before you take VC money, in case that's not what your long-term goal was.
100%. Yeah, I think, and going into the point, I think sometimes you meet a founder I just need to raise 100, right? And then I don't need to raise again. And now, obviously, that there are really good senses of that. But then if you go deeper, sometimes you hit that pain chord where it's this is a legacy, I want to hand it off to my kids. So that's letting us know, okay, well, you don't even want these problems. You know what I mean? So, yeah, the only way an investor makes money is the company has to sell or go IPO, and
Type of exit.
some type of liquidation event,
Sure. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've been in business for over 26 years, so I have an early learning program.
Okay.
It's a school. So I would just like to tell the panel, because you guys are pretty young, the first thing about starting a business is that know that swimming in money. Yeah. But what I wanted to say was that thank you, panel, because in the 26 years, thank God for pandemic, it helped me understand the pivoting is important, and also having the right connections and relationships was very important. And the only thing that I would like to suggest to the panel is to find a lot more about the minority, because y'all had great answers, but it's more in depth. When I went to the bank starting before the 26 years, the bank gave me nothing. I had the finances, I had the credit, I had the character, but I was black. So the relationship can be great, but also you gotta understand sometimes relationships is false. Because all the banks really want is your money. And they don't wanna loan you anything out. So, I just wanted to just thank you guys, and I will be getting some business cards so I can talk further with everybody. But yeah, great panel. Thank you very much for giving us some great.
And let me add, no, appreciate
you.
you. And your name again?
Oh, I'm Terry Sims.
Terry, great. Thanks for bringing that point up too, and then we'll continue the conversation. We have all been there, both be it regardless of what side of the table that we've been on in terms of the why was this not given a green light, if you will. The work that I'm engaged in is exactly that, is working with financial institutions to talk about that implicit biases that goes on a lot of times. And I will share again, when you have a founder of color that has worked in a bank, for example, we were having this conversation earlier, Gayle and I were talking, 20, 25 years, and they've managed a $100 million portfolio. And Manny and Gloria and Bryant knows this too. And then they decide to leave, right? They want to branch out. You know, I'm 20 years in. I don't want to do the retirement piece. So I have the itch. I want to do it now. Or I have a great business partner that says, man, if we don't do this now, the window's going to close. And they go to get investment opportunities, not even from that same bank, but and they're rejected, right? And they're like, wait a minute, I managed 100. I mean, I say this, but it's like I managed a $100 million portfolio for a global bank, and you're telling me that I can't manage 10 million? Are you looking at page 8? You know, and so a lot of that is the educational aspect, and I know Gloria's been heavily involved in that process too, of not so much of the uncomfortableness that is there, but tell me why. And the due diligence sometimes on the credit and what you've done and all those kind of things, but then we see white counterparts who have nowhere near that experience of a portfolio of managing that level of money are approved. I've had founders come to me in that particular case, and so that's that internal financial institution structure, history that Manny kind of talked about that we have to work through. And bankers will tell you that is something that they have internal challenges with a lot of times on, let's not set these meetings up and do the traditional check boxes because we're wasting our time and the reputation. But I just wanted to add that point. I don't know anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, I wanted, because I do, I used to be, there's whether 4 C's, 5, 6 C's of credit, right? I mean, I was steeped underwriting. I started my banking career here in Dayton, right? And you as a person, as a black person, as a black woman, you get caught up in those check boxes, those systems, because that's what you're talking. These are the rules. This is how it works. Oh yes, you were declined. This is why you were declined, right? See these check boxes. You didn't hit 4 out of. You didn't hit. Hit 5, but you didn't hit 6. So I was, I do a lot of education, education around getting funded and funding, and then I was just kind of doing a post on the 5 C's or the 6 C's of credit. And as I thought about it, now that I'm more informed, right, this is again why when you're in the room, you need to do your homework and know what and be able to challenge the process. I'm like, these things are not, okay, net worth. We all know that, Black people have significantly less net worth. So I might have a great idea, I might have gotten some traction, but if net worth is one of the criteria, that's not going to necessarily help me, right? Or even if I have we've all seen the reports about appraisal value. So, right, Black commercial property versus, white commercial property, and even in personal property, like significant differences in terms of the appraisal, depending on who shows up on the appraisal day. So there's a lot of systemic issues that, like, our ecosystems, our processes have been designed around things that have worked historically for the past, and therefore that's why you keep seeing like the same people be getting funded and the same people not getting funded. So we as investors, as ecosystem builders, as LPs that invest in the companies doing the investing, need to challenge the process and really reevaluate, are these still legitimate in 2022 now that we know what we know? Because we're going to keep doing the same thing, following the same rules, we're going to keep getting the same results. So it's important for you to call those things out, us to call those things out, us to be self-aware, educate ourselves on the issues, and then go back in and look at every single process within our strategy, the organizations that we're serving, our approach, and look for creative and innovative ideas to unlock out those billions and billions of dollars that are not of potential revenue that are not being funded, right? So, and these are things that exist outside of the funding, and every ecosystem is the same thing. So we need to really go back and rethink the check boxes, the due diligence, the how we're evaluating funders. When we're on the board, how do we work with them? So thank you for raising that point.
Other questions? See a hand. Okay, great. 1 minute. So the lights are on. I wanted to make sure I didn't. Okay, great. Please.
I want to shout out to Solomon. Solomon, stand up. He was there yesterday at Early Risers. He's sitting at the table with Belinda, myself, totally different generation. I sent a challenge out to him when he said he wanted to be in business. If you show up here tomorrow, we're going to help sponsor you something. So I just want you to see the next generation.
Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. I appreciate that, Gayle. Thanks so much. And I think the other thing, too, and you've heard this, is just getting tied into the network that's in the room, the entrepreneurship centers, people like Gayle and Belinda and others. Make sure you value that while you're here. Age, don't even worry about the age piece. Matter of fact, we need you more than vice versa. Because a lot of times, too, we brought this up, is the scaling that we talked about from an investor standpoint. Where's your company going to be in 10 to 20 years? And I used to do that, as Manny knows, on the other end, and it wasn't about the scalability of the current customer, Solomon. It was the customer that was in middle school and high school that they had no clue about that was going to be purchasing their product. So that would have a question mark there that go do the due diligence. So if you're a founder right now, we ask that question, how do you know that this product is going to be scalable in the next 10 to 20 years? I want to see the research data. Now, research data is free, by the way. All right, you can literally ask those questions on LinkedIn, whatever the case may be, or what's missing. Those are the due diligence. So if you tell me that you got people, 1,000 people in China to respond to this, and you didn't have to go to China, that's huge. I mean, it's how hungry are you in that particular space to get things done. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. Lastly, in terms of, then we want to open this up with some networking and Q&A for you guys to come down and interact with the panelists. One of the last questions that I want the panelists to talk about. So where do we go from here, right? What are the solutions that we can give the founders in the audience that are in place right now that they can leave here if you were to give them 1 or 2 bullet points from your perspective of, we know about the data, we know about the challenges, we know about the biases that are happening now, but what are those solutions that they can plug into leaving today? Gayle, and I'll start with you.
Keep trying. I don't think that there's any silver bullet here. It's a lot of things that the panel's already talked about. Don't get discouraged. Don't take it personally. Just keep trying. And if you have the power of your convictions and you build your network and you get good people around you that believe in you, you'll make it happen.
Yep, and I'll plug the book Rework by Jason Fried. That one helped a lot. But yeah, I just think, if anything, leverage markets. I would say, so if you're in Dayton, try drive an hour to Columbus, meet people there, then go to Cincinnati, right? If you got friends in Chicago, leverage markets, because, Columbus calls himself Test City USA. So if you test it and it works, then the city's ready to let you test it somewhere else, right? So leverage markets, I would say, in Ohio, the heart of it all, right?
Yes, my advice would be to connect with other founders, right? Learn from them and their mistakes, so you can work smarter and not harder necessarily. Learn, they will help you to. There's a lot of things that happen that founders are reluctant to share publicly. A lot. And you can learn by building those relationships with them, because they might be reluctant to share with you because they're concerned about being able to secure other investment. But these are all, so then you have newer founders going in and having the same kind of experiences. So Founders can tell you, hey, what conferences you need to be at, what tech tools you need to be using to, help scale, make things efficient, best ways to find talent, investors to avoid, investors to, pursue. So there's so much hidden information and insights in these founders that have raised capital, and there's a lot more kind of tools and information where you can find these founders. You can typically find them too, South by Southwest, events like, Dayton Startup Week, Black Tech Week in Cincinnati, which has a robust ecosystem, online, LinkedIn, there's a Twitter. That's where if you're trying to do tech, VC, or whatever, you need to be on Twitter because there's a lot of conversation around that. A great founder, a great investor to follow is Lolita Taub.
Yeah, I like her.
Yes,
South America.
she curates a lot of information and resources for women and founders of color, and she's an investor herself. Catherine Finney is a great person too. I just like to deal with contrarian thinkers because they're always kind of thinking outside of the box, but they've been able to find success with their kind of contrary approaches. So find your founders, get to know them. It might be difficult. You have to be persistent because they're very busy, don't have a lot of time. They may not have 30 minutes. They might have 15 minutes to talk to you, but keep building those relationships.
I would say two things. One, build your network, and then two, do the work. Yeah. Do the work. Understand what your target market is. Understand what need you're trying to meet. How are you going to meet it better than how it's being met today? What core competencies do you have to build? What type of team do you have to build? How are you going to brand it, message it? Do the work. And that doesn't change for anybody who's looking for money, investment, or even trying to build a business. But you have to do the work. Yeah, I love the fact, 72%, you said 72%, right? I'll guarantee if they realize how hard it is, that 72% would go down to 12%, right? I mean, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur because you don't work hard, right? I'm going to own my business. It's so simple. I work 20 hours a week whenever I want to work. That is a bunch of BS. It is.
Yeah.
If you want to make $1 million, right, that's 10 years of making $100,000 a year. So you're going to have to put 10 years of work in to make that $1 million. It's not easy. Now, if you've been successful in the past, you can raise money easy because you have a track record. But there's not a lot of people who have been successful entrepreneurs and need to raise money because they already have the money because they made it. So do the work.
Brian, it's a great point because, and I'll make sure that you guys have access to that research because it kind of goes back to, I think, both of you brought up to have a great idea. The idea is I want to be an entrepreneur, right? So let me check that box. But the question becomes, that's not being on the cover of Fast Company, right? Before I'm age 35, it is, and then where are you at age 36? So you never hear about that person after they're on the cover. It's less than negative 1% of those people that return on that cover, but also the stress that comes with that. The other thing I will say to you is understand the importance of being significant versus being successful. I advise in that particular space of significance is, and you heard this from all of the panelists, so they're just reiterating this statement, significance is investing in people. And we've all been there in this room. Success is about, being recognized. And you're recognized with that plaque or that article in the paper or the Wall Street Journal or whatever, that's great. Significance is when a person comes up to you 10, 20 years later and says, you spoke to me at a conference, and I took your notes, and I'm actually this, and they're like, oh, wow. And now, you have not talked to that person in 10 to 15 years. That's significant, and those are the emotional times when you're at home or on your laptop or doing some reading that you'll remember that invest in people, not ideas. And I know these investors look at that all the time. This person, although the idea was so-and-so, their character was just spot on that I'm going to what? Take a risk here. The flip side of that is, wow, they had everything. The person was arrogant as all hell. Like, they didn't even care that, they walked in like, can we get started? Wait a minute, you're in my conference room. And so you get that era, so be very humble in this process. And be patient. That's the other thing I'll say, and then we'll have you guys come down. No one's ever going to be you. There's no new idea. I think Brian alluded to this in terms of Silicon Valley when they woke up, it was like, oh, we thought we were just cows in the Midwest. Well, it's called agriculture. and that's just not unique to Ohio, but there's also money in agriculture. And so when you understand investing in ag, then it's not so country after a while. Then you see the private jets coming in, landing at Port Columbus, whatever the case may be, and it's not about sports, right? It's about investing in terms of agriculture. So do the due diligence. You're going to be asked those questions being from Ohio. Tell me what you know about Ohio, and more importantly, what is the value added that you're bringing to this equation? Understand the sectors that you need to be going in. You may have a great idea, but the restaurant industry is not where we're going to invest. And I think the young lady brought this up. Know how to pivot. And know, and again, you don't like me because I'm first generation, I'm this and that. I'm like, no, your idea just doesn't fit our criteria. And so, don't ever take it personal, because it isn't. It's due to due diligence. What is Ohio's sectors right now? What is Georgia? What is Vegas or Nevada sectors? Do the due diligence before you pick up the phone and say, I have a great idea. It's all about timing and making sure you do that. So I just wanted to kind of do that, but I'm a person that I want to yield to any last-minute statements to my panelists. I want to thank, let's give the people who put this brought on, Andrea.
Thank you, Fifth Third.
Fifth Third Bank that's sponsoring this. I don't know if Fifth Third is in the house. If there's representatives from Fifth Third, thank you to be a part of this. I know they're out front. But it takes a lot to put on these kind of initiatives and these kind of events. The other thing I would say to you also is don't ever worry about the numbers of who's in attendance as long as you're here. Sometimes we get caught up of who and how many people are here, but the bottom line is you got up and determined to park at a meter, to park in a garage for a couple of hours. The question is, and I think this was asked before, now what? So please take advantage of the panelists that are here. Please come down. We're all about networking. We'd love to do some photos. I don't know how this works, but I'm just kind of being a moderator, I guess, for the panelists. But any last-minute statements from the panelists, and then we'll wrap up.
No, just thanks for your attendance, and thanks for the great questions.
And I'd say vote. We got a young brother that works for the state, so I know the numbers. Vote.
Get involved. There's a lot of dollars coming from the federal government. And then a lot of people are trying to decide how those dollars are going to be allocated. So now is the time to choose your votes wisely, and then to make your voice heard as entrepreneurs and make sure that your unique needs and initiatives are being addressed at the local, state, and federal government level, and make sure that those dollars are being allocated towards the right programs and initiatives, funds, and grant opportunities.
And I'll give one last plug for the Entrepreneur Center. They can connect you to other resources. I know there's the Greater Dayton West Incubator. There's a number of programs with private industry banks and others that are interested in looking at underrepresented entrepreneurs. So, and the Entrepreneur Center has all those connections. So I'll give a shout out to making a connection here.
Thank you.